So today we're looking into Jesus' disciple, and we are at James and John, the son of Zebedee. Alright? Yes, yes, yes. Give thanks and praise to the Almighty God, the true God of the universe, the only, the omnipotent, the omniscient, and the omnipresent. The God said, I am that I am, the Alpha and Omega. Glory be unto thee. Alright, yes, yes. James, the older brother of the two apostles, son of Zebedee, whom Jesus nicknamed Son of Thunder, was 33 years old when he became an apostle. He was married, had 4 children, and lived near his parents in the outskirts of Capernaum in Bethsaida. He was a fisherman, plying his calling in company with his younger brother John, and in association with Andrew and Simon. James and his brother John enjoyed the advantage of having known Jesus longer than any of the other apostles. This able apostle was a temperamental contradiction. He seems really to possess 2 natures, both of which were actuated by strong feelings. He was particularly vehement when his indignation was once fully aroused. He had a fiery temper when once it was adequately provoked. And when the storm was over, he was always one to justify his excuse in anger under the pretense that it was wholly manifestation of righteous indignation. In other words, he tried to justify his arrogance if he said, then boy, I know want to foolishness, etc., etc. Except for these periodic upheaval of wrath, James' personality was much like that of Andrew, Peter's brother. He did not have Andrew's discretion or insight into human nature, but he was a much better public speaker next to Peter. James was the best public speaker among the 12. Though James was in no sense moody, he could be quite and taciturn one day and a very good talker or storyteller the next day. He usually talked freely with Jesus, but among the 12, for days at a time, he was the silent man. His one great weakness was these spell of unaccountable silence. That is the man thing. The outstanding feature of James' personality was his ability to see all sides of a proposition. Of all the 12, he came the nearest to grasping the real import and significance of Jesus' teaching. He too was slow at first to comprehend the master's meaning, but ere they had finished their training, he had acquired a superior concept of Jesus' messages. James was able to understand a wide range of human nature. He got along well with the versatile Andrew, the impetuous Peter, and his self-contained brother John. So these are the 4 inner circle of Jesus' disciples: Peter, James, and John, along with Andrew. Though James and John had their troubles trying to work together, it was inspiring to observe how well they got along. They did not succeed quite well as Andrew and Peter, but they did much better than would ordinarily be expected of 2 brothers, especially such headstrong and determined brothers. But strange as it may seem, these 2 sons of Zebedee were much more tolerant of each other than they were of strangers. They had great affection for one another. They had always been happy playmates. It was these sons of thunder who wanted to call on fire from heaven to destroy the Samaritan, who presumed to show disrespect for their master. But the untimely death of James greatly modified the vehement temperament of his younger brother John. That characteristic of Jesus which James most admired was the master's sympathetic affection. Jesus' understanding interest in the small and great, the rich and poor, made a great appeal to him. James Zebedee was a well-balanced thinker and planner. Along with Andrew, he was one of the more level-headed of the apostle group. He was a vigorous individual but was never in a hurry. He was an excellent balance wheel for Peter. He was modest and undramatic, a daily server, an unpretentious worker, seeking no special reward. When he once grasped something of the real meaning of the kingdom, and even in the story about the mother who James and John who asked that her son to be granted place after the right and left hand of Jesus, it should be remembered that it was the mother who made this request, not them. And when they signified that they were ready to assume such responsibilities, it should be recognized that they were cognizant of the danger accompanying the master supposed revolt against the Roman power, and that they were also willing to pay the price. When Jesus asked if they were ready to drink the cup, they replied that we were. And as concerned James, it was literally true. He did drink the cup with the master, seeing that he was the first of the apostles to experience martyrdom, being early put to death with the sword of Herod Agrippa. James was killed by Herod Agrippa, similar to Jesus. James was thus the first of the 12 to sacrifice his life upon the new battle line of the kingdom. Herod Agrippa feared James above all the other apostles. He was indeed often quiet and silent, but he was brave and determined when his conviction were arose and challenged. James lived his life to the full, and when the end came, he bore himself with such grace and fortitude that even his accuser and informer who attended his trial and execution was so touched that he rushed away from the scene of James' death to join himself to the disciple of Jesus Christ. Wow, what a touching story, man. When he became an apostle, John was 24 years old and was the youngest of the 12. He was unmarried and lived with this is John we are talking about, brother John, with James dead now, basically. John Zebedee, the smaller brother of James. When he became an apostle, John was 24 years old and was the youngest of the 12. He was unmarried and lived with his parents at Bethsaida. He was a fisherman and worked with his brother James in partnership with Andrew and Peter. Both before and after becoming an apostle, John functioned as a personal agent of Jesus in dealing with the master's family, and he continued to bear this responsibility as long as Mary, the mother of Jesus, lived. Since John was the youngest of the 12 and so closely associated with Jesus in his family affair, he was very dear to the master, but he cannot be truthfully said that he was the disciple whom Jesus loved, although strong argument from some other religious sects said John was the disciple Jesus loved. You would hardly suspect such a magnanimous personality as Jesus to be guilty of showing favorism, of loving one of his apostles more than the others. The fact that John was one of the three personal aid of Jesus lent further color to this mistaken idea, not to mention that John, along with his brother James, had known Jesus longer than the others. Peter, James, and John were assigned as personal aid to Jesus soon after they became apostles. Shortly after the selection of the 12, and at the time of Jesus appointed Andrew to act as director of the group, he said to him, "And now I desire that you assign 2 or 3 of your associates to be with me and to remain by my side to comfort me, to minister to my daily need." And Andrew thought best to select for this special duty the next 3. First choosing apostle, he would have liked to volunteer for such a blessed service himself, but the master had already given him his commission. So he immediately directs that Peter, James, and John attach themselves to Jesus. They were just disciples and also bodyguard. John Zebedee had many lovely traits of character, but one which was not so lovely was his inordinate but usually well concealed conceit. His long association with Jesus made many and great changes in his character. This conceit was greatly lessened, but after growing old and becoming more or less childish, this self-esteem reappeared to a certain extent, so that when engaged in directing Nathan in the writing of the gospel, which now bear his name, the eighth gospel did not hesitate repeatedly to refer himself as the disciple whom Jesus loved, in view of the fact that John came nearer to being the chum of Jesus than any other earthly mortal. He was always there in Jesus' bosom. That he was his chosen personal representative in so many matters. It is not strange that he should have come to regard himself as the disciple whom Jesus loved, since he most certainly knew he was the disciple whom Jesus so frequently trusts. The strongest trait in John's character was his dependability. He was prompt and courageous, faithful and devoted. His greatest weakness was his characteristic conceit. He was the youngest member of the fold and his father's family, and the youngest of the apostolic group. Perhaps he was just a bit spoiled, maybe a spoiled child, talk about last child. Maybe he had been humored slightly too much. But John, of after years, was a very different type of person than the self-admiring and arbitrary young man who joined the rank of Jesus' apostle when he was 24. Those characteristics of Jesus which John most appreciated were the master love and unselfishness. These traits made such an impression on him that his whole subsequent life became dominant by the sentiment of love and brotherly devotion. He talked about love and wrote about love. 1st and 2nd John. This son of thunder became the apostle of love and the Euphesius when the aged bishop was no longer able to stand in the pulpit and preach, but had to be carried to church in chair. And when at the close of the service he was asked to say a few words to the believers, for years his only utterance was, "My little children, love one another." John was a man of few words, except when his temper was aroused. He thought much, but said little. As he grew older, his temper became more subdued, better controlled, but he never overcome his discrimination to talk. He never fully mastered his reticence, but he was gifted with a remarkable and creative imagination. There was another side of John that one would not expect to find in this quiet and introspective type. He was somewhat bigot and inordinately intolerant. In this respect, he and James were much alike. They both wanted to call down fire from heaven on the head of the disrespectful Samaritan. When John encountered some strangers teaching in Jesus' name, he promptly forbade them. But he was not the only one of the 12 who was tainted with this kind of self-esteem and superiority consciousness. John's life was tremendously influenced by the sight of Jesus going about without a home, as he knew how faithfully he had made provision for the care of his mother and family. John also deeply sympathized with Jesus because of his family failure to understand him, being aware that they were gradually withdrawing from him. the entire situation together with Jesus, ever differing in slightest wish to the will of the Father in heaven, and his daily life of implicit trust made such a profound impression on John that it produced marked and permanent changes in his character, changes which manifest themselves throughout his entire subsequent life. John had a cool and daring courage which few of the other apostles possessed. He was the one apostle who followed right along with Jesus the night of his arrest and dared to accompany him into the very jaws of death. He was present and near at the hand right up to the last earthly hour, and was found faithfully carrying out his trust with regard to Jesus' mother, and ready to receive such additional instruction as might be given during the last moment of the Master's mortal existence. One thing is certain, John was thoroughly dependable. John usually sat on Jesus' right hand when the 12 were at meat. He was the first of the 12 really and fully to believe in the resurrection, and he was the first to recognize the Master when he came to them on the seashore after his resurrection. The son of Zebedee was very closely associated with Peter in the early activities of the Christian movement, becoming one of the chief supporters of the Jerusalem church. He was the right-hand support of Peter on the day of Pentecost. Several years after the martyrdom of James, John married his brother's widow. The last 20 years of his life, he was cared for by a loving granddaughter. John was in prison several times and was banished to the Isles of Patmos for a period of 4 years until another emperor came to the power in Rome. Had not John been tactful and sagacious, he could undoubtedly have been killed, as was his more outspoken brother James. As the year passed, John, together with James, the Lord's brother, learned to practice wise conciliation when they appear before the civil magistrate. They found that a soft answer turned away wrath. They also learned to represent the church as a spiritual brotherhood devoted to the social service of mankind rather than as the kingdom of heaven. They taught loving service rather than ruling power, kingdom of kings. When in temporary exile in Patmos, John wrote the book of Revelation, which you now have in greatly abridged and distorted form. This book of Revelation contained the surviving fragment of a great revelation, large portion of which were lost, other portion of which were removed subsequent to John's writing. It is preserved in only fragmentary and adulterated form. John traveled much, labored incessantly, and after becoming bishop of the Asia church, settled down in Ephesus, he directed his associate Nathan in the writing of the so-called gospel according to John. At Ephesus, when he was 99 years old, of all the 12 apostles, John Zebedee eventually became the outstanding theologian. He died a natural death at Ephesus in AD 103 when he was 101 years of age.